Hello and welcome, or welcome back. My name is Jamie, and today I'm tasked with flying the Cessna 185 to an inlet on the ocean. It's been a while since my last video upload. I had to take some time to focus and study for an exam. I've also been running low on dopamine, probably because of the amount of editing I was previously doing. At any rate, I'm back. The lake I'm taking off from sits at 1,700 feet. The weather doesn't look too bad, but I'm expecting low ceilings and possibly rain for part of the trip. I didn't know it at the time, but today I was going to fly through a stretch of some of the worst weather I would fly in all season. It might not have been particularly bad if the terrain was flat, but in northern BC, nothing is flat except water. What made it particularly difficult was that the bad weather was in a narrowish mountain pass. The mountain pass is about 10 miles long. I've been through this pass a few times, so I know the terrain fairly well. However, it still becomes difficult to get through when the visibility is poor. Rain on the windscreen makes it seem even worse. The visibility looks very poor with the rain refracting off the windshield, but the visibility was still about 4 or 5 miles, maybe more. The ceiling ranged from about 800 to 1,000 feet from the middle of the valley floor. My plan was to stick to the valley wall so I could turn around if I had to. I chose the right side so that I could better see the ground in a left turn as opposed to a right turn. My rule is that if I can't see through it, I don't fly through it. But that doesn't always mean I'd fly through something I could see through. I also have ForeFlight with synthetic vision in the plane. I certainly don't use it as a primary navigation source, but if I ever found myself in IMC in the mountains, it could come in very handy. If you don't know what IMC is, it stands for Instrument Meteorological Conditions, meaning you would need to use your instruments to fly and navigate. Conversely, VMC, Victor Mike Charlie, stands for Visual Meteorological Conditions, where you would be able to use your eyes to fly and navigate. These terms are similar to IFR and VFR, but the two correspond to a set of flight rules rather than the meteorological conditions. As you can see, I'm still in visual meteorological conditions. I can see just fine. For airplanes, the minimum visual meteorological conditions for VFR flight in uncontrolled airspace below 1,000 feet above the ground are 2 miles visibility and clear of cloud. Just because these are minimums doesn't mean they're my minimums. I don't know if you've ever been in 2 miles visibility in an airplane before, but it can be very uncomfortable, especially in the mountains. The terrain ahead is rising, and it's raining. Heavy rain on the windshield makes it very hard to see. I'd been through here 2 or 3 times before, so I knew the terrain fairly well. I probably wouldn't have continued if this was my first time through there. I wasn't afraid to turn around, but the danger is that you keep telling yourself, just a little bit further, just a little bit further, and then it can be too late. Flying in weather like this can certainly be nerve-wracking, but it's also great experience. I think it helps refine the decision-making process, which is super important for bush flying. Bush flying is almost always done under visual flight rules, so it's pretty much a guarantee that you will encounter weather like this and be forced to make decisions at some point in your career as a bush pilot. With experience, the decisions seem to get easier, naturally. Area knowledge also makes the decision-making process much easier as well. But I think it's important not to let your experience turn into bravery. It was at this point I knew I could get through. I was near the highest section of the pass, and if you look right here, you can see out the other side. It was a little tight, but I knew I could make it. See? Not that bad. Well, it was bad, but not as bad as it looked. But for me, these are the moments in the bush where decisions are critical. I also think it's not the actual decision that is critical, but also how you set yourself up to make the decision. If I were flying down the middle of the valley, it would have been impossible to turn around. I was also ready to reduce power and add flaps in the turn to have the tightest turning radius possible. I always want to know exactly what I'm going to do, even if I don't have to do it. It wasn't bumpy in there at all either, which is another reason I chose to proceed. If I got a do-over, I might have flown down the left side of the pass, which might have given me a little bit better straight line view. But it's hard to say. There could have been more cloud in the way on the other side of the valley. I'm not one to push limits, but this was definitely my limit. It's not like an instrument approach where the minimums are set for you. In the bush, it often seems like you have to find them on your own. I do not recommend flying through a mountain pass in this kind of weather. Although some of you seasoned bush pilots out there watching this might be thinking, another day at the office. I think it's also important to say that I made the decision to continue through the pass, but turning around would have also been the correct decision. It's hard to make that call with passengers in the plane that really want to get to their destination, and employers that don't want you to turn around. But I always remind myself to forget about those external factors and make the safest decision, not the most economic decision or the most pleasing decision. I think most employers are likely pretty good these days about respecting pilots' decisions to fly or not fly, or to turn around. My employer was excellent. If you are a new pilot working on your PPL or CPL, I think it's also important to understand that your tolerances and understanding of weather will significantly improve as you gain more experience. I remember my first commercial job flying skydivers and how I felt about weather back then, flying around in flat southern Ontario, compared to how I feel and understand weather now, flying around in remote, unforgiving mountainous regions of northern BC. There has been so much growth for me, and the growth is far from over. The decision to turn around or divert because of weather should never be seen as the wrong decision. This area is quite nice, as you can probably tell. There is a bush runway there as well. I've never landed on the bush runway, only on the water. The wind has always been blowing straight up the inlet every time I've been in here. However, when it gets up to the top here, it seems to calm and swirl. It spooks me a little. I'm always trying to land the seaplane into the wind, and here it hasn't always been straightforward for me. On this day, however, the wind was pretty calm, and I was happy with how the aircraft was behaving, so I put it down. Here is the empty return leg, back through the mountain pass about an hour later.
It's not looking too promising at the moment. But we'll get in front of it and we'll have a look. See if we can see straight down through it. Just up here on the right. Ceiling's at about, well, it's broken. It's kind of scattered probably around like 5. We're at 42. But I think it's exactly the same as when we came in.
It was actually better, and there was no rain, which made a huge difference in the visibility.
26 traffic, continue Ferris, Arctic 1500, Boeing 737, 100 to the east out of and there now 15 in Ferris, present time is 207 Ferris, 219.
Pretty light with lots of power, so get into any downdrafts and whatnot. Should have enough to get us out of it. Oh yeah, I can see right through the other side, no problem.
So it's been a while since I've posted a video. This is the first one in a while. I think I've been running low on dopamine. I'd like to keep producing videos, but I can't do it without support. If you've subscribed, thanks. Consider your subscription a contribution to my dopamine production. If you can manage to find and hit the subscribe button, I will continue to try and create videos about flying while also documenting my career in aviation.
Oh yeah. Easy.
My entry into aviation was delayed as a result of an autoimmune disease called colitis. Some of you may be familiar with Crohn's disease. Crohn's affects the small intestine, while colitis affects the large intestine. People suffering with these diseases are often prescribed a drug called prednisone, or similar. Prednisone is mainly used to control inflammation. The problem is that you are unable to qualify for a pilot medical while using prednisone. At least in Canada, you don't qualify. This all happened to me at the age of 24. About 10 years later, I was stable on non-disqualifying prescription drugs, revisited my goal of becoming a commercial pilot, and qualified for a Category 1 medical. Now, fast forward to post multi-instrument commercial pilot. I had been fully rated for about a year, and then, on February 3rd, 2022, I was sitting in the oncologist's office at the Juravinski Cancer Center in Hamilton, Ontario, being told I had stage 3 testicular cancer. I was terrified. Turns out, testicular cancer has a pretty good cure rate, and I'm still here, minus one of the fellas. But the point here is that both irritable bowel disease and cancer are diseases related to the immune system. What's the trigger for this type of immunoresponse? Or in the case of cancer, lack thereof. Is it random? I don't think so. I think it's tied to our mental health. I think it's related to the stress buildup in the body. As pilots, we go through a lot of stressful training, on top of the stress we have in our lives. It's a world full of distraction and stimulation. The stress can also be stored from traumatic or emotionally harmful experiences we've had in our lives. I think our physical health is dependent on our mental health, and to work on our mental health, we have to talk about it. The problem, however, is this. As pilots, we know our job is dependent on our medical. If you cannot pass an aviation medical, you cannot fly. While it might be more difficult to hide physical problems at the doctor's office, like high blood pressure, it's much easier to hide mental struggles. Your relationships and your home life are always great, right? As pilots, we're afraid to discuss our mental health in fear of losing our medicals. At least that's how I feel. And I doubt I'm the only one. The irony is that if we don't discuss our mental health, we could risk losing our medicals due to physical health. While flying is the main theme of this channel, going forward, I'd like to stitch in a movement towards facilitating a discussion about mental health, with the ultimate goal of creating better physical health. So stay tuned for further details in upcoming episodes. Thanks for tuning in. See you in the next episode.
Okay, so I've arrived at the lake here where I'm going, and I don't have to spend the night somewhere else. Nice. So we're gonna have a look at it here. A little circle. There isn't much of a dock, is there? Wind shadows on both sides of the lake. It's a little bit, it's not glassy, which is nice, so